In this theory log, I took a dive into theories within the developmental lens, working chronologically, beginning with Morfett and Washburn's maturation theory. I can't say I agree with all the ideas within maturation theory, but I've been interested in exploring it alongside other developmental theories. Moving on to Piaget's theory of cognitive development in 1969, I knew I wanted to look at one of Piaget's theory because his work is still so prominent today. And finally, Holdaway's development of literacy development, introduced in 1979, holds some of the same ideas of maturation theory, but is much more specific and concrete and aids children where they are. Maturation theory, which was introduced in 1931, advocates maturation as the most essential factor in learning to read. It also advocates for postponing reading instruction until a child reaches appropriate maturation, approximately 6.5 years old. It believes that parents and teachers can cause damage to children's reading development if instruction begins too young, which I understand is a very controversial sort of idea within this theory. And it was the dominant theory in education from the 1930s to the 1950s. So millions of people felt the effects of maturation theory in their classrooms, in their children, and as they went into adulthood. Up next, we have the theory of cognitive development, introduced in 1969, which is the year my mother was born. Children's quality of thinking changes over time. 4 factors: biological maturation, activity, social experiences, and equilibrium. It took me quite some time to understand what the equilibrium factor meant, and I'll get to that in just a second. Biological maturation factors include genetic, hereditary, present at birth, family history, and health factors. I think that this is a very important factor to consider within this theory because of different learning disabilities present at birth. Activity factors include physical experiences that will affect growth, which reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the impact that physical activity has on student learning. Social experience factors include interaction with peers and adults that will affect their growth. I also find this very important in both students interacting with each other and interacting with adults. I think this also touches on meaningful relationships that are essential to children's learning and sort of feelings of being safe so they can create their best learning environment. And equilibrium factors refer to a child's desire to understand and see balance when it is lacking. So, what I determined equilibrium factors to mean is when a student experiences confusion or misunderstanding, if they seek to understand what is lacking, or if they, excuse me, decide to move on or neglect what has been taught. The theory of literacy development, introduced in 1979, asserts that reading is a natural developmental occurrence. Parents as literate models for children closely mimics children's natural development of oral language skills, which is something that I really enjoyed reading about and something I maybe wouldn't have thought about in the same way I'm thinking about right now. A huge emphasis on print-rich environments at home and in the classroom. And then the 3 major dimensions are explanation of the developmental nature of literacy learning, explanation of the 4 processes Holdaway viewed as central to literacy development, an explanation of methods of teaching designed to promote developmental literacy learning. The last one about methods of teaching, I think, is a really great thing to mention within a theory because the teaching is aiding their development, not creating the development. Moving on to strengths and weaknesses of the theories. Maturation theory, there wasn't as much information as I would have liked on maturation theory, but the strengths are that it advocates for developmentally appropriate tasks for children and advocates for students' confidence in taught skills. So, children, I believe, would have a more positive early learning experience and have a love for learning and reading and literacy overall as they moved through life as literate beings. And weaknesses, it disregards early reading experiences is such as being read bedtime stories, which I believe are essential to children's development and early reading experiences. And it withholds instruction for students who seek it younger than 6.5 years old. Where within this theory, I can appreciate maturation as the driving factor, but when students are in kindergarten or even at home and they are seeking to read and to have these experiences with a text, this theory negates that and instructs parents to withhold reading instruction or it can be detrimental to their learning, which is a huge claim to make. The theory of cognitive development. I had a difficult time finding weaknesses for this theory. I'm sure there are more out there, but some of the strengths include emphasis on children's thinking to evolve. A wide variety of factors impact students' development. Emphasis on peer interaction and social experiences. Developmental stages spanning over excuse me, spanning over years of language and thinking development, and there is a lot of flexibility within this theory. I really admire the comparison of literacy development to oral language development because they really do go hand in hand. And some of the weaknesses I found is that it is very broad. There are many factors and influences within this theory, and it is difficult to observe the development of children's thinking processes. Some of the strengths and weaknesses of the theory of literacy development. Some of the strengths are parents as models for literacy. It highlights the importance of reading instruction within the home, natural progression alongside children's oral language development, print-rich environments both at home and in school, and peer interaction. So you notice there's a lot of similarities with the theory of cognitive development and even some influence of maturation theory here. Some of the weaknesses is that it asserts the most critical instruction and modeling takes place within the home, and a lack of knowledge within the parental community. So, my concern with this theory is not all families having equal access to education and information and funding to provide children with a print rich learning environment. I don't believe that negates the theory, but it makes it harder to use in practice if the most crucial literacy experiences begin in the home, and not every home is the same. I did decide to take a look at the theory of literacy development in practice within the classroom. I broke it down into the stages. So, the pre operational period, ages 2 through 7, storybook reading and reading aloud, at home and in the classroom to model literate behaviors and build oral language development. So, this could look like interactive read alouds, which is something I've been experimenting with a lot in my school, and it doesn't come as naturally to make it interactive, but I really do believe it's meaningful, and I could see students applying what they have learned in our interactive read aloud to their independent work. During the concrete operational period, ages 7 to 11, utilizing graphic organizers to organize thoughts related to reading comprehension. Um, I've used a little bit of this in my classroom. It's very early in the year, but making things such as webs of thinking and Venn diagrams to compare and contrast. And there's a variety of activities that can really push students' thinking about reading comprehension in meaningful and creative ways. And then the formal operation period, ages 11 to adult, which is a very broad time, um, includes complex strategies related to reading comprehension, such as creating projects and cultivating papers based on reading mixed with personal experiences and opinions. I'm kind of looking at this project sort of like an appropriate activity for the formal operational period as an adult learner because it is a critical look at three theories and it does have a lot of my own opinions and voice within this presentation. So, what does this mean for me as a second grade teacher and an adult learner? So, I like to still think of myself as developing as a literate being. And my students are 6 to 7 years old, putting them at the end of the pre operational period and the beginning of the concrete operational period. So, I think to utilize this theory's ideas and practices and see effects, I really have to work hard to have a combination of the two and move them through that progression in second grade because once they move to third grade and fourth grade, the practices in our school are very much concrete operational period practices. So it's sort of my job to prepare that and begin to introduce those kinds of experiences with texts and learning. And for myself, I think challenging myself as a literate being and bringing my research together in presentations like this really does help me remember what I've learned in a meaningful way, and it gives me something to look back on and grow from. And as a teacher, just considering the different things that I've been learning through my courses, such as these early theories that have impacted education and still continue to do so. Thank you for listening and giving us this opportunity to create a more meaningful presentation to synthesize all of the information we've been learning about different theories.